Okay, let's unpack this. When most people in the West think of Buddhism, they tend to picture a very specific image.
Oh, absolutely. It's all calming meditation, maybe some yoga, and this general idea of mental wellness.
Right. It's almost always reduced to just one word, mindfulness.
And that modern representation, which scholars often call Buddhist modernism, is actually a relatively new thing. It's a hybrid, really, forged through contact with Western psychology and rationalism.
So for this deep dive, we want to customize it for you, the learner, and strip away that modern veneer to get to the um, sophisticated philosophical core of Buddhism, straight from our scholarly sources.
Exactly. Our mission is to look beyond those popular myths.
We're going to trace the historical origins of the Buddha. We'll examine some really radical philosophical concepts like non-self, and then, this is the fascinating part, see how these ancient ideas are finding resonance with modern science.
Especially quantum physics, which is just an incredible parallel to explore.
So let's start at the very beginning. The historical founder, Siddhartha Gautama.
Right. So traditionally, he was placed around the 6th century BCE, but a lot of the scholarship we looked at now suggests a slightly later date. Many scholars seem to agree he likely died around 405 BCE.
And that's an important detail, right? It places him in a very specific, very dynamic intellectual period in India.
It does. He was born into, real wealth and power, but he famously abandoned all of that.
The Great Renunciation.
The Great Renunciation, yes. He left to solve what he saw as the fundamental problem of existential suffering. I mean, just imagine that choice, to leave a life of total luxury.
But he wasn't alone in this kind of quest. He was part of a much bigger movement.
A huge movement. Buddhism really grew out of what's called the Shramana tradition. And this was a broad class of wandering ascetics and spiritual thinkers.
Like the Jains, for example.
Exactly, like Jainism and another group called the Jivika. And the one thing they all had in common was a rejection of the authority of the traditional Vedic scriptures. They were all trying to solve the puzzle of samsara, this endless cycle of suffering and rebirth.
So the goal the Buddha set out was nirvana, the complete end of all that suffering.
The end of the cycle. And the path he taught to get there is what's known as the middle way, or Majjhima Paipada.
And it's called the middle way because it's steering between two philosophical extremes.
Correct. Two extreme views that were very popular among the other Shraman groups at the time.
So the first extreme would be eternalism.
Right. Eternalism is the view that there's a permanent self, an Atman, a soul, basically. Something fixed and unchanging inside of you that lasts forever.
And on the complete other end of the spectrum, you have annihilationism.
Annihilationism, which is the belief that at death you are just gone, utterly wiped out, no continuity at all. And the Buddha thought both of these views were, frankly, dead ends.
So the middle way isn't about having a soul or not having one. It's a third option.
It's a completely different way of looking at it. The middle way proposes that life is just a causal series, a flow of impermanent, impersonal psychophysical elements. There's a process, but no permanent thing undergoing the process.
Okay, that is a crucial insight. Let's dig into that, because this is where things get really radical. We have to start with the problem itself, dukkha. It's almost always translated as suffering. But our sources suggest that's a bit of an oversimplification.
It really is. A better word might be unsatisfactoriness or existential friction. It's not just about, stubbing your toe. It's the deeper feeling that everything we rely on is unstable and impermanent. That subtle, constant feeling that things are just not quite right. That's dukkha.
And what's the root cause of that feeling? Where does it come from?
Well, this is where it really challenges our most basic intuition. The core ignorance that fuels all this dukkha is the deep-seated belief that there is a permanent I, a me.
Which brings us to the doctrine of non-self, or an Atman.
Exactly, an Atman.
This is so hard to grasp. I mean, I feel like I feel like I'm the one having this conversation.
Yeah.
How does this doctrine take that apart?
So the Buddha's analysis says that what we call a person is just a bundle of 5 changing processes. They're called the skandhas.
Okay, so what are they?
You have form, which is just our physical body. Then feeling, our sensations. Perception, which is recognition. Volitions, which are our mental impulses. And finally, consciousness itself.
So just 5 components, all constantly changing.
Right. And the doctrine of an Atman says that if you investigate these 5 things, you will never find a permanent, unchanging self hiding in there anywhere. The I is an assumption we add on top of this process.
But wait, that sounds a lot like annihilationism, the extreme he rejected.
Mhm.
If I'm just a dissolving cloud of processes, what's to stop me from saying, well, nothing matters then?
And that is the genius of the two truths doctrine. It's how the middle way avoids that nihilistic trap.
Okay.
So on one level, there's conventional truth. It's useful and conventionally true to talk about a person, to say I and you.
So that's our sort of social and ethical operating system. It allows for responsibility. I could say the me of tomorrow will experience the consequences of my actions today, even if we're not metaphysically identical.
Precisely. It encourages moral accountability. It's what allows us to function in society.
But then there's the other level, the ultimate truth.
The ultimate truth is that there is only this causal flow of impersonal, impermanent elements. And nirvana is what happens when you fully experientially realize that. When you stop clinging to the idea of a permanent self as the center of it all.
This leads us straight into the biggest philosophical puzzle of all. How can you have karma and rebirth, a system of cosmic justice, if there's no soul to be reborn?
It's a brilliant question, and the sources are very clear that the Buddha taught a strict view of karma. Actions have consequences that carry forward.
But what is it that carries forward if not a soul?
Causality. Nothing substantial moves from one life to the next. The better analogy is lighting one candle with another.
Okay, I like that.
The flame on the second candle is causally dependent on the first, but it is not the same flame. It's a continuation of a process. Neither the same nor different. It's a causal sequence.
So the momentum of your actions, your karma, necessitates the continuation of that stream of consciousness.
Yes, until that momentum runs out.
Let's shift gears a bit and talk about misconceptions, because for many of us in the West, what we encounter is a very specific, often secularized version of Buddhism. So let's debunk a few. The first big one. Buddhism is a philosophy, not a religion.
A very common one. And while it has incredibly deep philosophy, it is absolutely a religion. It has rituals, a cosmology, devotional practices. The only way it isn't a religion is if your definition of religion requires a creator god.
Which brings us to the next myth, that Buddhism is purely atheistic.
Here we need to be careful with our terms. It's better to say it's largely anti-theistic.
What's the distinction?
It actively argues against the concept of a single, all-powerful, self-existent creator god. For example, the philosopher Vasubandhu made a really sharp logical point. He said if the universe came from a single cause, everything should have popped into existence all at once.
Which it obviously didn't.
Right. But that doesn't mean the cosmology is empty. Buddhist cosmology is filled with celestial beings called devas. Gods, essentially.
But with a big catch.
A huge catch. They are more powerful than humans, they live longer, but they are not eternal. They're still subject to karma and rebirth. They can't offer you ultimate liberation. They're just another stop on the wheel of samsara.
Okay, final major misconception. The idea that meditation and mindfulness have always been the main practices for everyone.
That's a very modern idea. Historically, meditation was mostly a monastic practice, and often just for specialized monks. Widespread lay practice is really a 20th century phenomenon.
And the type of mindfulness we see everywhere now, vipassana, that's also quite recent, isn't it?
It is. It was developed in Burma in the early 20th century. Historically, there were hundreds of different meditation forms for concentration, visualization, analysis, all sorts of things.
So just to round this out, what are some other quick-fire myths? Not all Buddhists are vegetarian.
Definitely not. For example, Tibetan Buddhists often aren't, for practical reasons. And monks would traditionally eat whatever was offered to them.
And Buddhism is not inherently pacifist.
While non-harming is a central value, you can find examples of Buddhist armies in history, and even Zen masters in Japan supporting military action in World War II. It's more complicated than the stereotype.
So if we look at the modern era, this dialogue between Buddhism and science seems to be the most visible expression of this Buddhist modernism we started with.
It really is, and it's fascinating because you have two totally different methods of inquiry. Science is third-person, objective, looking outward.
And Buddhist practice is first-person, subjective, looking inward. An inner science, really.
Exactly. But they find common ground in their suspicion of absolutes. Neither likes the idea of a fixed, unchanging essence to things. They both prefer to explain the world through complex interrelations and cause and effect.
And here's where it gets truly interesting. The parallel that people like the Dalai Lama have drawn between Buddhist philosophy and quantum physics.
Right, because quantum physics just completely shattered the old predictable clockwork universe of Newtonian physics.
It showed that on a subatomic level, reality isn't made of solid little balls. It's a world of probabilities, of uncertainty.
and, crucially, of interdependence. Things like quantum entanglement show that particles aren't isolated entities. Their properties are defined only in relation to one another and in relation to the observer.
This sounds an awful lot like the Buddhist idea of svabhava, or the lack of it, the lack of inherent existence.
That's the connection. This is why the Dalai Lama constantly brings up the second-century philosopher Nagarjuna. His whole philosophy was based on shunyata, emptiness, and dependent origination.
Dependent origination, the idea that nothing exists on its own, everything arises dependent on causes and conditions.
And because everything arises dependently, it is therefore empty of any independent intrinsic existence. It's a purely relational reality. Quantum mechanics is, in a way, the scientific proof of this ancient philosophical insight.
So when Nagarjuna wrote, whatever dependently arises that is explained to be emptiness, he was basically describing the subatomic world 1800 years early.
In a philosophical sense, yes. Both systems, in their own language, are telling us that the universe is not a collection of things, but a web of relationships.
We have covered a huge amount of ground in this deep dive. From a prince renouncing a kingdom to solve suffering, to cosmic justice without a soul, and all the way to quantum entanglement.
It's quite a journey.
But the thing that really stands out to me is this core idea that liberation isn't about escaping reality. It's about seeing its relational nature with total clarity.
Precisely. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, this dialogue between an ancient inner science and our modern outer science suggests a huge shift in how we seek knowledge. It moves us away from searching for fixed things and towards understanding dynamic systems. And that leaves an important question for you to think about.
What's that?
When we truly start to accept this concept, that all phenomena, from our own sense of self to the tiniest particles, exist only in this dynamic web of relationships, how does seeing this relational reality fundamentally change the scope of responsibility we feel toward the world and to each other? Something for you to ponder. We hope this deep dive helps you explore further.